Gita, Krishna tells Arjun that these bodies that we have around us, Arjun, point to be noted, the bodies that we have around us, Arjun, are constantly changing from childhood to youth to old age. Remember the shloka? Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yovanam jara tatha dehantar praptir dhiras tatra na muhyati. So, recently, some of the scientists who have been very, very interested in carrying out this research on what is really the nature of the consciousness, who is really the living entity. So one of such very famous researchers, Dr. Let me quote him here, Pin Van Lommel, quotes in his book, The Science of Near-Death Experience, that we, or in fact, for that matter, any living organism is losing, actually destroying and regenerating about 5 lakh cells every second. Now, do you realize the enormity of that information? 5 lakh cells every second are being destroyed and recreated. So much so, he also goes on to say in this book that in about 2 weeks' time, every single atom and molecule in this body is replaced by another one. And that really holds evidence to the shloka number 2.13, where Krishna tells Arjuna that we are changing every moment. The bodies, not we, the bodies are changing every moment, Arjuna. Now, if the bodies are changing every moment, now that would include the cells in our eyes, the cells in our kidneys, the cells in our skin, and the cells in our brain, the neurons as well. If they are changing and being replaced by new cells, then who is it that remains the same person throughout life? That I say, I am. Who is that I? If the body is changing every moment, then what is that one fixed identity, my sense of I-ness that never changes? When I'm a child, I say I. When I am a youth, I say I. And when I'm drawing close to, old age and death, I still say I am. So who is this I that never changes? We are doing shloka number 2.17, the very beautiful shloka with a very extensive and scientific purport by Srila Prabhupada that's going to open out a whole new world of the spirit soul to us. We discussed many aspects in the last session. Today we are going to continue. But before that, let's say the prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjan Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin iti namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. The recitation of this magic Maha Mantra will make the process of gaining this knowledge of the self easier for us. So as Krishna tells us later in the chapters in Bhagavad Gita, that there is an intuitive mind, the mind which is beyond all rationale of this material knowledge, but it is a very, very powerful tool. It is this mind, this intuitive mind that just knows that I'm not this body. And if we invoke this intuitive mind and be connected with Krishna, that will be the beginning of all spiritual knowledge for us. So shloka number 2.17, once again, I'm not reciting the shloka again because we have limited time and I would like to tell you so many more things. Now, in the previous session, we discussed from the purport that the soul is minute. It has a size 1/10,000th of the tip of the hair, quoted from several Upanishads. It lives in the region of the heart, and it is implicit by, or it is actually visible or to us in the sense that it spreads in the entire body in the form of consciousness. Consciousness is the symptom or the energy of the soul that pervades the entire body, which is the kshetra or the field of activity for one individual living soul. We also studied that our consciousness is limited to one body and very rarely sometimes to somebody who we are very attached to. For instance, a mother instinctively knows if her child is in pain, and that is because of the extension of the consciousness. But otherwise, our consciousness is only limited to our body. But the consciousness of Paramatma, who is the grand soul, is actually pervading in the entire universe, and that's how he knows what's happening in every part of this universe. Now, we also studied that this soul, which lives in the region of the heart, is trapped within 5 material airs. And the process of Hatha Yoga, it aims at freeing the soul from these material airs to achieve liberation. Now, talking onwards from there, we understand that since the soul lives in the region of the heart, we may ask the question when there is a heart transplant. We of course have heard that many people, and this is a common occurrence these days, people whose hearts stop functioning or are not functioning that well get a heart transplant. So if somebody gets a heart transplant, does the soul also get changed? Which means after the heart transplant, is the person the same person or the person becomes different, another personality? Well, the answer to this is the person remains the same if the person doesn't change. Why so? Because the heart is the seat for the soul. So when the heart is transplanted, only the seat is changed. Just something like, a king sits on a throne, and if the throne gets degenerated, it's only the throne which is changed, but the king remains the same and he takes on another new throne. Now, very interesting questions come up in our mind. If one soul lives in one kshetra or one body, cannot more souls enter this kshetra or this body? Well, the answer to this is very mystifying. Actually, we have so many more souls living in our body. Don't forget the millions of germs that live in our intestines and elsewhere. Don't forget the tiny worms sometimes. Well, if during childhood, many of us may have got infested by worm infections, and deworming is a common, let us say a part of the growing up cycle. And the worms which are present in our intestines are actually different souls, different living entities. So when we say only one soul can exist in one kshetra or one living body, we actually mean that souls which are similar in consciousness can only occupy one kshetra at a time, which means another soul which is similar in consciousness level to the human soul that is inhabiting our body cannot enter this body without a struggle. Now, what did I say? Without a struggle. That means it can enter. Well, have you heard of the ghosts possessing some people's bodies? Well, that's true. As is the presence of ghosts. Yes, ghosts exist, and that we have scientific evidence for that, as well as evidence from the Vedic Shastras. Well, now when I say consciousness of the same level, let me explain to you, as I have found out from my spiritual mentors in ISKCON, that consciousness of different living entities is at different levels. So to speak, every soul is equal originally, because every soul is a part and parcel of Krishna. which means my soul and that of an elephant, that of a bacterium, that of a plant are all same in their essential quality. But because of the previous karma and desires, the soul's consciousness becomes covered by a lot of dirt. And that's why the soul's consciousness does not exhibit its true glory in all living entities. In the plants, the consciousness is covered to a great deal. In the moving organisms, it is covered, but not to that degree. Well, the soul is the least covered, the soul's consciousness rather is the least covered by dirt in case of human beings. That's why we say the human beings have the most elevated consciousness. But that also means that every living entity has the potential to regain its glory back. We can take a small analogy to understand this. Suppose we have a light bulb. That's the source of light. Now we have a light bulb which is absolutely clean with no dirt in it. That is a pure soul with the entire consciousness radiating out like light from it. But suppose I cover this light bulb, say with a red cellophane paper, then of course the amount of light emitting from this will become lesser. Or in other words, you can also say if this light bulb gets covered by a layer of dirt, then the amount of light emanating from this light bulb will become lesser. Another example or another analogy, or to extend this analogy further, let's say if we cover this light bulb with opaque black paper, the amount of light emitting out from it will become even lesser. So that's the difference between the consciousness of the different living entities. The light bulb is the same, that is the source of consciousness, that is the soul, is the same in its quality, but how much light can it emit? What is the level of the consciousness depends on how much covered or uncovered it is, which again depends on the previous karma and the desires that the soul has had in past. So to speak, coming back to the topic, in one particular body, suppose we have a human body, so only one human soul can inhabit this, because the other human soul, which is similar in consciousness, will not be able to live in it unless there is a fight. Let's put it simply. And that's why sometimes ghosts who do not have a gross body sometimes try to possess the gross body of other living not just any living entity, but of other human beings. Now we have to tackle two questions here. The living entities of lesser consciousness can inhabit the human body, just like, the bacteria and the worms do, right? Now, there is one more question that's coming to our mind, right? Suppose we have an earthworm. Now, there is one soul inhabiting that earthworm, but we have seen that if we cut the earthworm into two parts, then the other part also transforms into another earthworm. So, what does that mean? Is the same soul being split into the two parts? Right? No. What happens here is when we cut the earthworm, a new kshetra or new body is created. So another soul, which is at the level of the consciousness of that earthworm soul, can now inhabit this new soul, this new body created. So now that becomes two different bodies inhabited by two different souls. So there are so many more questions that come into our mind like that. You might be getting so many questions later also, and we can, tackle them later if you care to post them on the chat or the Facebook, the live section. Now, coming back to the ghosts. Now, this is a very interesting topic. Who are ghosts? Ghosts really do exist. Now, suppose there is a human who is destined to live for 70 years in this body. Now, whether he is suffering or enjoying, he still has to live for 70 years. But by some reason, because of some reason, if that person gives up the body, before that time, say at the age of 40 years, what happens then? Now, this person is destined to get another body only after 70 years. But if that person, commits suicide, gives up this gross body, what happens is that he is left with no gross body at all for the next 30 years. But he does have a subtle body. Interesting, right? We talked about this in the last section also, that the living entities, the humans, for instance, are 3-in-1 personalities. We have a gross body, then we have a subtle body, and then we have a soul. The gross body, which is made up of these 5 material elements, is what we see, and this is what we actually leave when we go out after death. But the subtle body, which is made up of 3 things, the mind, the intelligence, and the ego, that travels with the soul, rather it carries the soul to another body. Now this subtle body, also has subtle senses, by the help of which it can perceive the world around. The ghosts can see through their subtle eyes. Actually, the eyes that you're seeing here, the eyes which are a part of my gross body, are only gross material eyes. They are only instruments. Actually, what is seeing is the subtle eye inside it, which is passing the message to the mind, and then finally the message goes to the soul. So the ghosts can perceive, they can see with their subtle eyes, they can hear with their subtle ears. So if there is somebody who used to like eating the rasagulla a lot, now the ghost is seeing people eating the rasagulla but cannot eat it himself because he doesn't have a material tongue to eat that rasagulla. So the ghosts are personalities with the soul and the subtle body, but minus the gross body. But they have all the desires which he used to have when he was embodied. So a ghost who's a disembodied personality has those desires, has those cravings to fulfill the desires, but is in extreme agony because he cannot fulfill these desires because of the lack of the loss of the gross material senses. That is the reason why sometimes ghosts with a lot of desires, with intense desires, try to occupy somebody else's body, gross body. And that's the reason why people who have seen this experience happening in front of their eyes will report that the person who was possessed, ceases to become the original person. He becomes a different personality. And when that ghost, subtle body and soul is exorcised, removed from that particular person's gross body, he again returns back to being the same person as he was originally. A very it actually sounds like a great mystery, but it isn't. It is Vedic science that explains to us that our real existence is as a soul. And this soul, along with the subtle body, that is the mind, the intelligence and the ego, sometimes exists without the gross body. And then that is when we call it a ghost. And this is something, this is not really something which is inherent only to the Indian customs or Indian culture. We can actually take a look at the different cultures in the world, be it the ancient Greek culture or the Roman culture or the Gothic culture, and we find the Chinese culture, the Japanese culture, and they all believe, they have been proponents who have very vocally voiced their acceptance of the soul, the ghosts, and so on. Very interesting. So that brings us, to the conclusion that soul does exist and it can exist even without this gross body. And there are some experiences quoted, are in fact studied by the scientists, of the reincarnation, of the near-death experiences, and the out-of-body experiences. We are today going to start talking about some of the reincarnation experiences. Now, I'm not hurrying through this part because, interesting and mystifying as these experiences are, they will also help us to build our faith scientifically on what is being told in the Bhagavad Gita. Now, there's a doctor called Dr Ian Stevenson. Well, he's no longer there, but he spent his entire life investigating cases of reincarnation. He traveled to several countries, including India, where he scientifically studied these claims of reincarnation. He's written several books. He's a Canadian psychiatrist, by the way. He's written several books, like, for instance, there's one called Children Who Remember Their Previous Lives, 20 cases suggested of reincarnation. Now, he has documented thousands of cases in these books, which will serve to actually prove to you, finally, without any doubt, that the soul does exist and it reincarnates from one body to another, as the Bhagavad Gita is telling us in this section of the shloka number 2.11 to 2.30. Now, there is one case reported here of a certain person, a boy called Deep Kapadia. Deep Kapadia was born in Mumbai, and as soon as he started talking, he started speaking in Marwadi. Well, Marwadi was not their mother tongue. He was a Mumbaian and Mumbaite, as you may like to call him. So he had no access to this language anywhere in his family or in the friend circle or anybody who he knew in his say, small life, about 2 years or so. So he started speaking Marwadi at the time, and he slowly, as he started growing up, he continuously told his parents that he is a certain Mr. Agarwal from Jodhpur. Now his parents obviously did not want to give too much importance to these sayings. They thought that maybe he's just speaking out something that he has heard, maybe somebody speaking in the television, or maybe somebody that he knows. But as he grew up further, when he was about 4 years old, he was continuously telling his parents to take him to Jodhpur because he wanted to meet his son, his previous family. Now, there was this time the parents reported the case, and in fact, Dr. Stevenson and his colleague, Dr. Satwant Pasricha from Bangalore, started investigating this case. And there was no way that the child could have visited Jodhpur before that. Now, they took this 4-year-old boy to Jodhpur. Now, as soon as the Jodhpur station was about to arrive, he started calling out the names of the stations which are going to appear. The parents as well as the investigators were amazed to see this. Now, as soon as the last station before Jodhpur passed, he says, okay, now please pack your bags because now we are going to arrive at Jodhpur station. And sure as hell, they did arrive at the Jodhpur station right after that. When they got down, he guided them to his house from his previous birth. He recognized his son, his other family members. He also told that I was a guard, a security guard at the city palace in his previous life. Now, to understand the claim to be true, all these investigators along with his family went to the city palace and started investigating if there was a guard by the name of Mr. So-and-so Agarwal, and how had he died, in what circumstances had he died. So the staff there told them that yes, indeed, there was a guard by that name, and he was stabbed by some people who envied him because this guard was very close to the king. Now, this boy, Deep Kapadia, now in this life, took them all to the tour of the city palace, and he, explained the different artifacts which are placed in the city palace, the museum. He also told them of a secret door which opened out where various very precious artifacts were kept and nobody else knew about them. In fact, the guards at that time, or the curators at that time in city palace, did not even know how to light up the kerosene lamps there. It was Deep Kapadia, who was Mr. Agarwal, the security guard, city palace, showed them how to do it. And he proved it beyond doubt that indeed he was this person in the previous life. There are so many other cases, the one of Shanti Devi from India. In fact, this case was investigated by Mahatma Gandhi himself. He sent actually a delegation to prove it. And indeed, his case was proved to be correct. So there is no dearth of such cases. If you care to, investigate further on your own account, please do get your hands on these books by Dr. Ian Stevenson. I have put the links, in fact, not the links, the names of the books and the authors in the YouTube description, then in the session. And also, there is one book called Many Lives, Many Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss. He is also he's also a psychiatrist, and he has documented many such cases in these books that will give you a hair-raising experience. You must have heard of past life regression therapy, in which under hypnosis, the psychiatrists and the psychiatrists can, make the person remember events from his past life. There are so many cases in which the birthmarks in a certain individual can correlate with the past life experiences. For instance, if somebody had died because of or yielding to 7 knife stab wounds, and when he was born again, he had those stab wounds markings in exactly the same 7 places. There are several phobias people suffer from. Phobia of water. Many times comes out that the person must have died. In fact, he did die of drowning in the past life. So there are so many different cases documented, proved without any, even this bit of doubt that yes, reincarnation does exist. And if you want to prove this further to yourself, I would urge you to get your hands on these books and read further. Well, we are still not through with this particular purport, because so much more to share for particularly instance the near-death experiences and the out-of-body experiences, and some experiments with the brain itself, which I will share with you in the next session. Till then, please chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and be happy. Thank you for watching.